today, and I'm excited to learn a little bit about you. I think this is a great place to start because this shows a little bit about how you guys have thought about your brands. So let's starting with you, Erica. Tell us a little about yourself and your work.
Absolutely. So I'm a personal brand strategist. I've been doing it about 10 years. I was a coach and columnist with the Daily News. My column was Let's Get Digital. So we talked a little bit about resumes, but also, how do you go from the resume to that digital space where we're all expected to present ourselves now? My company is Cake Resumes, and I help people, especially those who don't have traditional career paths or stories that are easy to tell, explain themselves in resumes, cover letters, bios, you name it. I can help you create it. And it's a simple, fun, easy process.
All right, awesome, beautiful. Thank you very much. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. Jessica, tell us about yourself and your work.
So hi everyone, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I am Jessica Zweig. I'm the founder and CEO of the Simply Be agency, and we are a personal branding agency. So we really work with entrepreneurs, executives, CEOs, creatives, solopreneurs, people from all different industries or industry agnostic on helping our clients to really show up online in a far more effective and intentional way so that they can drive their opportunities forward. We really specialize in messaging, strategy, social media, and core content creation to really dive deep into what makes you the person to hire, what makes you the person to refer. And so I'm really excited to be here with Erica and really answer questions and just add as much value as I possibly can. I'm also a recently published author. I just published my book 2 days ago. It's right here. It's 2 days. So I've been in the market 2 days. So I got to talk about it. So this book is really here to honestly help people in your position, that can't necessarily engage an agency like mine, and instead I gave it away basically for free, well, for 25 bucks, to just really teach and empower people how to show up online with more authority and clarity. And so I'm really excited to talk to you all today.
Yeah, it's called Be the No Bullshit Guide to Increasing Your Personal Brand, right?
No, it's
By
called
simply being
close.
yourself.
It's called Be a No Bullshit Guide to Increasing Your Self-Worth and Net Worth by Simply Being Yourself.
There
So
you go.
it's a
Love
really
that.
great. Yeah, thank you. I'm really
I
excited about it.
do I do like that Amazon is not okay with the word bullshit in their hyperlink. So if you see that link I dropped in there, they called it the no bullsh. It's the no bullsh, which it absolutely is. And actually, Jessica and her team are kind enough to give away 10 copies to 10 of you guys. So whoever stays on until the end, 10 of y'all are gonna win. Oh, someone's pre-ordered. I love that already. That is awesome. So here's where we're going to start. We're going to talk a lot about brand. We're going to start broadly, understanding what brand is, what brand means, and then we're going to start to narrow it into exercise to be able to figure it out for a job seeker. So, Jessica, I want to start with you. What does the word brand mean? How's it
Mhm.
evolved over the years?
Yeah. So for me, brand is your value. It's knowing what makes you you and stepping forward into that unapologetically. And in my view, the point of a brand is to evoke an emotional connection, right? Like we follow brands we love, right? We feel something when we see Nike, or we feel something when we see, Glossier, a makeup brand, or we feel something when we see BMW. We feel something different when we see a Honda, right? So you are a brand, whether you know it or not, whether you want to be or not, and becoming really clear on what your brand is, i.e., what is your value, what you uniquely bring to the table, and how you make people feel, is a superpower. It really, really is. When we click on to the fact that we have mastery over our own narrative and to show up more consciously and intentionally, it really can drive your business and your career. And I'll let Erica answer this question too. I'm a walking testament of that. So let's just say we can get back to more personal stories, but my whole life changed, my whole career changed. It took off when I realized my own brand and the power behind it.
Yeah, I love that. So brand is emotion, right? Brand is what people think about when they hear you. There's a quote I love that I've been talking a lot about recently at our events, that communication is with the listener, meaning it's not about what you say or what you write or what you do. It's about what people read or what they hear or what they see. And brand is very similar. What do other people believe? What do other people think and feel when they hear Jessica or Erica or Adrielle? Now, I also want one more question for you, Jessica, and then we're going to Erica. But what is the difference? You guys work with big companies. You know, you mentioned a bunch of those. You also work with Google and many others. And you work with individuals on sort of thought leadership programs, have their people become known as leaders in their space. Now, what is the difference between those two? And Erica, I'm going to go to you with something similar because we talked about this a little bit before. What is the difference about how a company thinks about their brand? You know, I know we have a lot of marketers on here, and how an individual thinks about their brand.
Well, a company brand needs to be clear and articulated consistently and evoke emotions as well, right? That's the power of a brand, and it serves both. But I believe it's really powerful statistic when a company message, when a company brand message is shared by the individual, an individual who works at that company, it gets 561% more reach than when the company itself shares it. And so thinking about yourself as a key component in the marketing communication strategy of your company, really front facing you, the face of it, or the person at it, isn't just like fun. It's really smart and really necessary. And people do business with people. I say this all the time. We don't do business with a masthead of a logo on a website. We'll come back to a company based on our personal experiences with the people behind it. And so I think that both company and brand need to have their own clarified position. If you represent a company, you have to understand deeply what that company stands for, and then identify how you uniquely can express it, but also really understanding that they have different points and they have different ways of impacting. And I mean, I'm biased. I obviously run a personal branding company, but I don't think that there's any other better strategy today than building a personal brand to really pierce through and connect with people.
I like that a lot. I think that one statistic you shared, that if an individual shares a message, it's 500% more likely to be seen and noticed than if a company shares a message. Really important. And we're going to talk a bit about how to communicate that in interviews, communicate that in resumes, because you know that the companies you're trying to work for are thinking, does this individual represent my brand properly? Because they know the statistic. They know that if Lisa says something about the company, it's going to go a lot further than if the company says something about the company. Erica, you made a great point when we were chatting before this about the evolution of the word brand. And I know you studied this quite a bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how branding has evolved as a science, as a contact sport? How's branding evolved over the last few decades?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the way that you put it when we were chatting in terms of people aren't cans of soup. If you read about branding online, you're going to see a lot of exchanges where people say, people aren't products, people don't need brands. And if you're thinking about brand in a 1950s sense as something you want to sell, something you want to promote in a one direction type format, then yeah, people aren't brands. But if you think about brands in terms of 2021, you do want a brand because you're relational. You're going to go from transactional, so a commercial that interrupts your favorite programming, right? To a touch point that feels like a conversation and exchange and something that connects. And when you think about brand that way, who doesn't want one?
Yeah. Erica, so let's use that as a jumping off point into careers. So how do you think, first of all, in your own personal career, and Jessica, I'm going to go to you similarly, when did you start thinking about personal brand? When did this become part of your mindset, part of your thought process, part of your self-reflection? When did you start thinking about what is Erica's personal brand in Erica's career?
Yeah, so my background was not in HR or recruiting originally. I was a museum studies major, and I was lucky enough to graduate into the recession. So my job options were extremely limited. I picked up a job at a career services firm, so I had, the obligation to think about personal branding from day one. And in working at that startup, I gained experience with resumes, cover letters. And for a long time, I used to keep that museum background as a dirty little secret because it was something that didn't work out. I saw maybe I'd invested a lot of time into something that had failed. And now it's my strongest asset in what I do because at the end of the day, a museum exhibition is about storytelling. What's the big idea? How do we make a collection of Victorian gowns or paintings or postcards from the 1920s compel people in a few core ways? So now I'm helping exhibit people's careers and their lives and their value and what they stand for. So I was thinking about it from day one. But when that startup sold, I had to think about it even more intensely. I found myself unemployed. And I had all of this, what I felt like was random knowledge about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, how to present yourself to the world. I became an entrepreneur overnight. And in that happening, had to build my brand very quickly because I had bills to pay.
Yeah, I like that. Jessica, I'm going to go to you in a moment, but Erica, one more question about that. A lot of people on this call many lost their jobs during COVID, and many use that as an opportunity to switch careers big time. They were salespeople, now they decided to go into data science. They were people in the travel industry. Now they say, I am done with that racket. I want to go into cloud SaaS software, whatever it may be. What do you tell a client who's making a big switch, similar to what you did? You went from museums to career coaching. Couldn't be more different, possibly. What do you tell a client about how to think about how to describe that experience going from one thing to a very different one, and how to begin thinking about their brand in a totally new industry or profession or group?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time when we think about changing careers, the term transferable skills will come up, and that's useful and valuable. I'd also encourage everyone to start thinking about transferable attitudes, mindset, bedside manner. There's a lot of, you can retrain, reskill. But if you've been successful in a certain environment like hospitality, and then let's say you stepped into something that was slower moving like academia, no matter how you've recertified, re-upped, what you're bringing from a credential standpoint, I think you also have to begin shifting or be honest with yourself in terms of the perspective and the energy that you're going to bring. Those are just as important to your brand. And I think a lot of the time they're left out of the conversation because we're hoping to check requirements or qualifications off on a box. And the way that we show up and walk into a room is just as important as the things that we can list on our resume. So as you make those shifts, get familiar with the people and the audiences that you're going to be interacting with, ask a ton of questions, and make notes about how they speak, how they talk, the things they laugh at. That transferable mindset is just as important as your transferable skills.
I like that. That reminds me of what Jessica said at the start of this, that brand is emotion, right? Brand is not a list of accomplishments unless they make you feel an emotion. Brand is not a list of past jobs unless they make the person feel an emotion. But brand is the things you're able to do, the way you're able to communicate about yourself, the poise you have in a room, because of those things excite emotion. Jessica, I want to go to you next, and I want to take this as an opportunity to hear a story I know you have about when you were kind of pretty low down there and you were having a troubling time, and how you began to climb out of that. And I'd love for you to share that story, but specifically, I want to hear how that might apply to many of us who now, many of us have been laid off since March or April of last year, how you might advise somebody to think about what that period and that tough time might be like as they think about their brand moving forward and how they communicate that to employers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have so many thoughts. So, it didn't always look like this. I didn't always run a business that, was thriving. I was an entrepreneur and founder of another company that I ran for 7 years, from 2008 to 2014. And we had basically imploded and we went bankrupt, and I was in $75,000 in debt, and we had no money coming in. I had to call people and lay people off because we couldn't pay them. It was a really low moment of my career. And yet there was this really interesting sort of juxtaposition at the time, because I had been running this very, very popular online magazine. And so the story of my brand, my reputation from the outside in, was very different than what was going on inside. And so I really was scary and it was tough, but I decided to walk away from this business. You know, we had to clean some things up, of course, but I had a business partner, like we separated, and I announced online that I was leaving. Obviously did not give away the details, but I shared, you know, I'm leaving this thing I built to go start this other thing that I'm going to go do. I'm basically going to start my own one-woman consultancy. And I made this announcement online by one single Facebook post and an email to my network. And within a week, I had a full book of business. And I didn't make a single sales phone call to start this whole new company. And I started making real money. And that was my aha moment about my own brand, and that I had somewhat unconsciously built it over the last 7 years, building this magazine and as face of it, that it was enough information for people to call me, not the other way around. And I just became enthralled with this idea of, oh my gosh, if I did this accidentally, what would it look like if I got really intentional? You know, look at the power of this thing I did as a byproduct. And at that same token, I was like, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm not going to tell all the details, but I'm going to be real. I'm not going to let people think the perception of me. I'm going to show up fully authentic and be of service of what I've learned, not just as a businesswoman, but as a human. And that was when things started to really click. And that's when things started to really start to attract and magnetize in the most ideal way for me, because I was attracting people that were actually interested in that energy and not just, you know, what they saw on the internet. And that was my right clients. That was my right network. Those became my right team members. That became the right media opportunities. So I really think that there's such power in the authentic piece of this work that we don't even realize, that people want to know who we truly are. And I just have to say, guys, like I've been through it. Like I just gave you a high level of some of the darkest moments of my life. I actually write about it in my book. And you can make it through it. You can really be resilient. And I found that my personal brand was a key tool in empowering me to change my life and to get to the next level. I know it sounds lofty, but it's really true. And then the last thing I just want to say, Adriel, before we move on, Erica, you said something really beautiful when you were sharing. You know, we hired 3 new people. We grew in 2020, which was wonderful. We hired 3 new people in this summer. We had 800 people apply. We looked at every single resume. Believe it or not, we fielded all of it. And the people we ended up hiring weren't necessarily the bullseye as far as like the job description. They were really dynamic elsewhere. Like I hired someone that had no agency experience, I'm an agency, no agency experience, but was an actor who worked at Starbucks, who served as an assistant at his church, and like had all of these different dynamics that he did not hide. And I thought that was it showed me something I didn't even know I needed. So I would just be very confident in your story, because you have no idea how powerful it is until you share it.
Yeah, I think that's well said. That actually reminds me a bit of what Matt posted in the comments here. He wrote, brand is being able to shut down one of your senses and just know what is being emitted. It's that powerful. I think it's really, brand is what you feel. Brand is what's around you. Brand is what people say behind your back. Probably in a more long-winded way than you might take the time to write down specifically. Jessica, I mean, Erica, excuse me. I want to bounce off of what Jessica said when she talked about authenticity. I've had this conversation with many job seekers, which is everyone says be authentic, but then I'm a little too goofy and it feels bad, or be authentic, but then I share this weird story in my history and like, is that even relevant? So I want you to dissect authenticity as it relates realistically to what a job seeker is going through, because there's a certain level of authenticity, but there's always professionalism, and the two are certainly blending as time goes on. But I want you to dissect how to take authenticity, how to actually write about that in a resume, talk about that in an interview. What does that look like?
Oh, sorry, my mind's racing because there's just so many different touch points that you have to consider, and you have to handle each of them differently during a job search or even after you're job searching. You shouldn't stop, building or, gaining visibility for your brand just because you've landed your next opportunity. What I would say is your brand's not a tattoo. It doesn't need to look the same way and stay the same in the same spot at all times. So depending on the setting, right? Depending on where you're presenting yourself, whether it's on LinkedIn or in a conversation, you get to pivot with that. You don't have to be the same person all the time, and it's not inauthentic to read the room and decide how you want to show up. For example, when I'm speaking to an audience of college students, I talk less about my unemployment experience, that startup selling and then having to become an entrepreneur. That path might not be viable for them. I focus more on that element of exiting a program during a recession and having to rethink the way I was going to enter the workforce, right? It's the same story. I'm just wrinkling it a little bit depending on who's listening to it. The other thing I would say is authenticity is just as much about the knowing what you don't know as much as it's about knowing who you are. So if a question comes up in an interview and you can't answer it, the most authentic thing you can do is say, I'm not really sure what you mean, or I don't have a straight answer to that. Can I ask you a few more questions? Right? It's not always about, having our personality glow as brightly as possible, but being real about what's happening in that moment, whether it's in the comment section of a post on LinkedIn or again in that interview room. There's a lot of ways for authenticity to show up.
Oh my God, brand is not a tattoo. I might get that tattooed on myself. I think that was genius. Brand is not a tattoo. I love that. And I think that's so valid, right? I've been quoting a lot. I'm large, I contain multitudes. The Walt Whitman quote, I'm large, I contain multitudes. And it's up to you when those multitudes show up and which versions of them show up in different ways. I like that a lot. Well said. I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of brand. So let's start with Jessica. Jessica, when an individual comes to you and says, I read a bunch of the case studies on your site, which are really fun to read. You've got a doctor who comes to you and says, I want to be a leader in this. Like, what do I do? And you've got athletes who come to you and say, I want to figure out how to do this, or business people. One guy's like, I want to be the best person in the rail industry. Like, I don't know what that really, but like, that's what they said. What do you walk them through? What does a workshop look like for you? And what are some very clear steps that folks here can take on their own to say, all right, deep breath. My name is Steve, and this is what I do. What are some of those clear steps that they can take that you walk your clients through?
Sure. So we actually have a program, and I'll break it down for you and give you kind of the high level tactics. It's called the Thought Leader Day. I often say, if you want to be seen as a thought leader, you have to think, you have to position yourself as an expert. You have to create content online that's deeper than an Instagram post, deeper than a LinkedIn post. You have to open up the aperture and show people more of you. And we can do that in a multitude of ways today. Podcasts, blogs, videos, webinars, emails. Like, there's so many ways to really enrich it. But at the end of the day, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's all tactics and strategy, right? We start in the Thought Leader Day. It's a 9 to 4 session. We spend pretty much all day with our clients, and we begin, to be frank, with some self-limiting beliefs or a little woo-woo at Simply Be. So we kind of like shake up our clients and kind of get them into their hearts, not just their heads. And then we'll start with goals, right? Like, what are we actually aiming for here? What are our objectives?
I want to dive in. What are some of those questions you ask your clients in that woo-woo, figure out self-limiting beliefs? What are a few examples of questions you might ask them to be able to get them into that mindset?
Love it. What is your big, hairy dream? Like, if you could just claim your highest vision and highest, biggest, most audacious dream for yourself, write it down. What is that? Put it on paper, look at it. That's where we start. What do we choose to believe about ourselves today, in this moment? What are your self-limiting beliefs? We ask them to write them down. Like, what are some of your biggest fears that are coming up right now? What has blocked you from even showing up in the first place today? What do you think will block you when you leave, right? Like, what are those self-limiting beliefs? And we spend a few minutes journaling. We play some music. They really get in touch with that. And then we dive in, right? To really set the space of like, okay, this is about me. And you have to really give yourself that permission, like to to invest in yourself and spend this time, whether it's hiring someone like me, whether it's reading my book, which I want to talk about because everything I'm about to share with you, I do for my clients. And I'm giving it away in this book. So the day I deconstructed this thought leader program and put it in this book. So we start with goals, we start with objectives. We want to understand, what does success look like to you? How do you know you achieved it in 6 months, 12 months? What does that tactically, quantifiably look like, and qualitatively look like? So we map those out. And then we start with messaging. Like, what is my brand? We define the brand of you. And branding, my friends, among many things, is an exercise in clarity, as I often say. It's about creating that emotional affinity within less than 30 seconds to someone who's never heard of you before, right? That's hard. But a brand can do that. Starbucks can do that. It's coffee. It's a little pricier, but not like, we know what Starbucks is. People are complex. We're not easy to understand in 30 seconds. So I've created a tool called the Personal Brand Hologram, which will help you achieve your brand message with clarity and depth at the same time. So that tool is proprietary. I trademarked it. I charge thousands of dollars to do it for my clients, and I gave it away in my book. There's 2 chapters on my book. It's all DIY, like step by step on how to do this. Then it's audience and competitive landscape. So who are you trying to reach, and what makes you different in the landscape of the same people who are trying to reach those people too, and really defining those distinctions. And then we talk about voice, we talk about style, we talk about tone, like all the things that make a brand like sticky. And then in the afternoon, we dive into strategy and really thinking about what's your core content. Because again, it's not just about living and breathing on social media. Social media is a conduit to reach your people, but you have to zoom up and think about, what makes me a thought leader? What makes me the authority? And you can't convey that in a caption on Instagram, but you can in a video series. You can in a podcast. You can in a couple different blogs. And so we encourage our clients to really look to that kind of content, and we help them define what that content is for them based on their goals, based on their audience, based on their competitors. We look at all of those things to define what we call the white space, to then create a strategy. And we start with that pinnacle piece of content, and then we identify the ways we can distribute that content through social, through email, through micro versions of content, to get our clients seen more consistently. And then sometimes we'll do a bit of PR. You know, a lot of our clients want to be seen in the media, and that's great. It does help amplify and get you in front of other people. But, you know, for this group, I would really just think about your own platform right now, your own message, your own strategy, how to really uniquely reach your unique audience and stay the course. Consistency, that's not something we've really talked about yet. Clarity is king, consistency is queen. So you really want to stick to the script and show up every day or a couple times a week and serve and be consistent with your message so people know what to attach to. And the hologram, by the way, is really going to help you do that. And if I just can, I mean, I want to like belabor this too much, but I just want to open this up quickly and just show you guys, right? This is like trademark stuff. It's tools, it's frameworks that are quite teachable and accessible. Like, it's a workbook. And so I really I know that we're giving 10 copies away, but if anyone wants to pick it up, it's, you know, I think $25 on Amazon, and it's going to teach you what I serve my one-on-one clients in a book. So I was very clear on that years ago when I started this, that I wanted to democratize it. This stuff shouldn't be a secret. It belongs to everybody. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I love it. I want to use that as a jumping off point to talk about what you said a little bit, which is audience, right? Audience is so important. If you are interviewing with a startup, you've got to be talking about adaptability and hustle and passion. If you're interviewing with a Fortune 500, you've got to be talking about rigor and systems and collaboration with cross-functional teams and synergy, whatever that is. Right? Your audience matters. So I want to start with Jessica, because a question came in, and I want to go to Erica and talk a little more about audience. But Jessica, the question that was sent was, has Jessica ever had a client who didn't know what their ultimate dream job is? If so, how do you help that person get here? So again, if a job seeker comes to you and says, I've done this and I'm kind of interested in that, but I don't really know where to go or what kind of audience to cultivate, right? I don't know if I want marketing jobs at startups or environmental related positions at Fortune 500s, whatever. I don't know where to go exactly. What sort of process, what sort of questions might you put them through to figure that out?
Yeah, such a good question. So I often say that building your personal brand, maybe I already said this today, is an inside job. It's not an outside projection of what you want the world to know about you. You have to do the work inside first. And what we do for our clients, many of our clients come to us at a precipice, at an inflection point. They're ready to take this step, right? And that's a mindset shift. And some of them have more clarity than others. Oftentimes, though, when you do the inner work to really understand what lights you up, what's your favorite things to talk about? What are you passionate about besides what you do or what you've done? What else gives you fuel? And we start to really pull those apart and then prioritize them, right? Like, what are the things that you can talk about endlessly? What do you want the world to know about you? What's sacred and private doesn't belong in your message? And we start to really look through this laundry list, if you will, and we narrow it down. And that's actually the foundation to the hologram exercise. And then we've come up with this message. Again, it's the inside job that then I think in many ways reveals to the client, this is what I want to do with this. This is where it belongs. This is where I want to be. And then we build that strategy, right, around the message to get them in those places and to get them in front of those right people. And so I would really, again, whether it's my book or something else, like to really do that inner work. My book has a lot of guiding prompts to get you there, but we really have to. Actually, I'll give away a quick exercise in my book, and then we can move on because I'd love to hear what Erica has to say. But sometimes it's really hard for us to identify what makes us great. We're a humble species. We're not, most people are at least. So we sometimes need some help, right? That's why you'd hire someone like me or find a partner. But instead, I'm recommending you find some friends, find 3 to 5 people in your life. Make sure they're a mix of professional relationships, people you've worked with, past clients, past employers, teammates, mentors, and personal relationships. And ask every single one of them the same exact question, which is, what is my unique intrinsic value? Ask them that question. Have them hold up a mirror to you. And then ask them to give you their feedback in writing. And that becomes your data. That can become the foundation to your value proposition that you could never articulate for yourself, but the people who love you and believe in you will. So that is a really powerful starting point to kind of crack into the inner work of what your message can be in order for you to then find the realization of, this is what I want to do. Because a lot of people don't know, and that's okay. But if you do that inner work, it can reveal itself to you.
I want to share 2 quick things that might be helpful as well. And then Erica, I want to go to you on that note. So I just dropped in the comments Riveter's interview tool. So for those who are new, Riveter has an interview tool where you're able to browse how different people have answered common interview questions. You're able to practice your own answers. You can keep them private so nobody can see them, or you can make them public so the Riveter community coaches can give you feedback. So the link I dropped in there, if you're signed in, it'll take you to the right place. If you're not signed in, then click the link again. You'll see how a bunch of different people from very different backgrounds have answered the tell me about yourself question. And the tell me about yourself question is essentially the what is your brand question. It's the first thing people learn about you in an interview question. So explore how some very different people have answered the questions. And you'll see that one person says, I am a lifelong learner, and here's some examples. Another person says, I have an entrepreneurial spirit, and here's some examples. Or I'm a designer and I'm a creative, and here's some examples. And get inspired by that. The second exercise I think is really, really fun is go into the what is your biggest strength question and answer it 3 times. Answer it 3 times with 3 different strengths. Because what you'll find is that each time you answer it, you might get a little bit deeper. It's usually not your first answer that's the most honest. The first answer is the first one that comes to mind, but you'll begin to get a little bit deeper. And keep them all private. No one needs to see them. These are just for you. But answer that question 3 times and then rewatch your videos and see, was it my first answer that said adaptability? Is it my second answer that said creativity? Is it my third answer that said collaborating cross-functionally, whatever, you'll figure out what is that biggest strength. And that is one way to start thinking about what your brand is. So really fun tool, really fun way to begin exploring that. And I'd recommend you playing out with those two things. Someone asked if this recording is going to be available. Absolutely. Y'all will get an email in a couple of hours with the recording, start to finish. Erica, let's go to you here for the final little bit here and talk about audience and talk about how to present yourself to different audiences. So it's going to be a bit of a loaded question, so feel free to take your time answering. But job seekers have a lot of documentation and a lot of places where they're presenting themselves. They've got resumes, they've got cover letters, they've got applications, they've got interviews, and they've certainly got professional networks like LinkedIn and less professional networks that are blending into the professional like Clubhouse. They've got all these different places. How do you advise the clients that you work with to think about both the audience and how that might be different in different places? You know, even within a company, a resume might have one audience versus an interview or an application has another. And then how do you think about people, how should people explain their brand in different ways in different places? You know, you could speak about it in a interview or on Clubhouse. You have to write about it on a resume or an application. You can do video or long form thoughtful things on a personal website or LinkedIn. It all appears in different places. How would you help people consolidate all these things and all these messages in very different media?
You know, I liked what Jessica said about clarity being king, consistency being queen. I'd say curiosity is their castle. You want to start, before you even start defining, I've got this piece, that piece, the other piece of who you are and what you want to put out there. Ask questions. Ask questions of the types of people you want to connect with. And sometimes that's through a conversation. Sometimes that's a quick Google search and you're able to look into what the narrative already is on a topic, right? Do that research because it might lead you to say, here are some core things that I should talk about because they're commonly talked about, or here are some things that no one's talking about. And that's what's going to differentiate you, is being able to, yes, speak to those common threads, but also pull forward ideas that no one has before, right? And it's your enthusiasm for those ideas that's going to help you connect with people. You know, the other thing that I would say is your brand is a tree, right? You're going to have that central trunk of things that you're always going to project no matter what the platform. And there's other things that are branches, that are leaves that sway around. But no matter what, I would say divide things between empathy and authority, your points of empathy and your points of authority. So my points of authority are, you know, my content's been syndicated on Forbes and Fast Company, a bunch of cool websites. I had a column, things of that nature. Authority, authority, authority. Another way to think about it are, what's your proof? How do you build trust with people and let them know you can do the job that you promised to? But those points of empathy are a little bit, I don't want to call them softer, but warmer. You know, I do satire writing in addition to being a resume writer. I traveled in an RV for an entire year and ran my business from the road. You know, I've built remote teams and I've worked with people all over the world. While those things aren't credentials, they're not big flashy names or logos that I can put on my website, they're just as important to balancing who I am. So then when we boil that down to, well, how do those play out on a resume? How do those play out on a cover letter or on LinkedIn, right? Think about the formality of the platform that you're on. An interview, typically that's a more formal environment. You might lean more on your points of trust and authority. I don't know if I'd talk about RVing during an interview. Maybe if I was interviewing with a company that manufactured RVs. When I'm looking at my resume, well, where am I submitting that resume? It's usually an HR department. That's typically a more buttoned up, more formal environment. I'm going to lean more on my authority. It's funny. So often we're taught to think our resume is supposed to encapsulate everything that we are. I don't know about you. A piece of paper is not going to contain me. Not in any given day, no matter how many bullets I use or the way that I edit it, right? It's supposed to be an appetizer, right, to a much bigger meal. So it's really balancing that empathy and authority. Too much authority, you're going to feel like a drill instructor, right? If I show up and all I talk about is being published on Forbes on LinkedIn, people are going to be like, get out of here. We can't stand you, right? LinkedIn's, for example, a really conversational platform. So I'm going to be more playful. I'm going to be conversational in the way that I talk about the different things that I do. I don't talk about resumes all day. I talk about feeling valued at work. I talk about what it's like when I'm trying to write down an idea and how I struggle with that. Everybody has trouble getting their thoughts on paper. Just because I write resumes for a living doesn't mean that doesn't happen to me. And I'd say, think of any platform as a way of forming a relationship. And relationships are research. So anything you're putting out there, continually take the feedback on it. And again, go from having that tattoo to having an outfit that you pull on differently every day.
Wow, I'm gonna, by the end of this, I'm gonna be covered in tattoos because of you, Erica. What did I write down? Clarity is king, consistency is queen, but curiosity is their castle. The curiosity is their castle. I love that. I think that's awesome. Guys, we're gonna do a couple more things here before the end. I got one more question for each of you. Let me very quickly, Kathy, if you can put yourself on mute, that would be appreciated. I can't quite, there you are. Okay, Kathy K. All right, so what we're gonna quickly do is actually do the book giveaway first. So 10 lucky people are gonna win Jessica's book. And so I have everybody's name here on a randomized list. I'm gonna randomize it 2 more times just for total epic randomization. I'm gonna read off your names. If you guys can send me an email, if you hear your name, I will put my email in here. If you hear your name, if you hear your name, I will, if you hear your name, please email me your name, your address, your shipping address, and we'll get that book out to you. So are we ready? Let me get some magic hands here. Some magic, are we ready hands? There we go. All right, and our winners are Steve Saburin, Lisa Gregg, Christine Whalen, T. McD, Tanya McDermott, Janina Aratola, Joe Gaudette, Kimberly Clark, Chris Habeck, Anastasia, I don't see a last name, but I hope you know who you are, Anastasia, and Amy Alonso. And Amy Alonso, I'm gonna drop those 10 names into the chat in case you didn't hear yourself. But if you are one of those 10 names and you can email me, congratulations, you won a copy of Jessica's book, which I am so happy about. So congratulations, there we go, congrats. Guys, just a couple things left. One is actually a quick favor. Talking about brand, Riveters are redesigning our homepage. If you wouldn't mind, we're going to talk about events, and I would love to share a screenshot of an event as awesome as this one. If you are uncomfortable with a tiny little version of your head being on the homepage, turn off your camera for like 5 seconds. If you're okay with a tiny little version of your head being on there, what I would absolutely adore is if we can give a little bit of jazz hands for some energy. There we go. You guys are awesome. Let me do that. All right, perfect. I love you. I appreciate it. Everyone can turn your cameras back on if you hid. So I think we're going to skip the networking portion today because Jessica and Erica were so awesome and there was so much to talk about. And there were a few questions people dropped in the chat. So in the last 10 minutes, let's talk about those questions. So the first one, let me scroll up there. The first one was to Jessica, where this individual asked, before the implosion is how she phrased it. So I guess before the magazine didn't quite work out, did you know what your brand was? Did you know what people said about you? Did you know how people felt about you? Or is that something you started working on later?
That's a great question. I think that that's such a good question. I want to click into that because I was like the face of this very like hip magazine in the city, and I was going out all the time, and everyone, I hosted a ton of parties, and I was going out to parties, and it was this like kind of Sex in the City kind of lifestyle magazine of what was happening in Chicago and for women. And so it was a really fun chapter of my life. I'm not going to really like ever not credit it for being amazing in its own right, which was, but I don't really think I was very conscious. Like, I don't think I was really operating from a place of authenticity. Um, I think I was operating from a place of, to be frank, ego. And I was, I was young and I wasn't cool in high school. So all of a sudden I was kind of like cool in my late 20s. And all of a sudden so there's a lot of like false fuel. And then it wasn't, so here's my definition quickly on the distinction between inauthenticity and authenticity. There's a lot of different definitions and they're all valid. And I love what Erica said about it. But I view that like authenticity is love, shows up as love, and inauthenticity shows up as fear. And fear can be expressed as ego. And love is expressed love is expressed in a multitude of ways, so is fear. But love to me is showing up in service. And so my transition from one business to this now new business really was my own journey of shifting out of fear, out of ego, so I was conscious of my brand, I think, but I wasn't using it, I think, in an authentic way. And then when I left my magazine to start this now company, I stepped into service. And I was very clear that I wanted to be of service and value to other people and not just my own, sense of success. And so that shift was very transformational for me. And so I did have a brand back then, but I don't think I was really conscious of it in the first place. And secondly, I don't think I was using it in the way that I believe people should. So that was my journey.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. We have another question. I'm going to give this one to Erica. And then guys, if you have more questions, throw them in the chat. You can send them to me privately. But this one's from Lisa Gregg. She asked, how can you convey brand in a resume that needs to be ATS compliant, so many matching words, etc.? Right? You said yourself, Erica, look, it's a piece of paper, 1 page, max 2 pages long with a bunch of words in black and white type. Like, what can you really do there? And unfortunately, it is the norm. There's a few companies that are trying to change that with like video resumes, or you got your resume, like people are trying to work on that, but look, still it is the norm. What you're going to do about it? How can people convey something different about themselves in this template that, like it or not, that's the way it's going?
I'm going to answer this in 2 ways because Lisa's opened a can of worms for us. The first thing I'll say, and it's never very popular, stop thinking about the ATS. We all hear about the ATS, the keywords, the bots, the algorithms. Who wants to be in that pile? Who wants to be in an automated system? Yes, you might eventually end up there, but is that the way you want to access the opportunities in the companies you most desire? I'd say pull the camera back, start talking to people. Don't go looking for job descriptions, go look for people. And that brings us back to curiosity, right? Relationships are research. So you have the ability to ask all of these questions and give them exactly what they need to see and hear from you. Should you then get passed along the food chain in a company and someone asks for your resume? And even then, you're not in that black hole, right? You're in the hands of potentially the hiring manager, maybe their assistant or someone just below them on that food chain. And that way you're not trying to tell your story through strictly keywords. Should you think about them? Yes. Are they a consideration? You always want to be speaking the right language. What I would say second to that, right, is there's a lot of merit, or I should say credit or weight, in showing rather than telling. So if I tell you I'm creative, if I tell you I'm resourceful, I could say that all day and it doesn't hold any weight. But if I've got a section on my resume of projects and experiences where I was creative and I was resourceful, right? It goes back to that point of feeling that Jessica had, right? People are going to feel, oh, she was in an RV for a year and she does comedy writing. She's probably super fun and creative to work with, right? That's how our brains work. They hook into stories. Our brains don't hook into keywords.
That's right. It's show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Right? Show, don't tell. Don't tell me that you're creative. Show me examples of times that you're creative. Don't tell me you're looking for a job at startups. Show me things you've done with startups or whatever they might be. I like that a lot. Guys, again, if you have any additional questions, drop them into the chat. But I want to ask both of you, where are places, who are companies or individuals who you really admire in terms of brand? I know there's this concept in copywriting as well as graphic design and digital marketing, a lot of those things called a swipe file, right? A swipe file for any designer copywriting friends is basically like, here's all the stuff that I admire and I've got no ideas for myself right now. So let me look at a bunch of that stuff. What comes to mind for you? We'll start with Jessica, then go to Erica. What comes to mind for you for a company, brand, individual who you really stands out to you as somebody whose brand you admire and branding work you admire?
I have two. I'll give a personal brand and then I'll give a company brand. I love Danielle Laporte. I don't know if anyone's familiar with her work. She's a tremendous thought leader and has really built a platform based on her authenticity and a very successful business, sort of serving women to get more in touch with their souls. And everything she does is like flawless, but yet it's so real and raw and authentic. And I love her fonts and her colors and her material and her voice. And she's just really mastered the personal branding game and has built a platform of such service. So I highly recommend Danielle Laporte if you're into that stuff. And then what came to mind was Tom's shoes. So I saw the founder speak, and I really had such an affinity to his story. And that's the power of a personal brand and a company brand when the founder or the CEO or any face for that matter is like willing to step out and really, give their why. But I love that they basically disrupted the give back like model, and they're just very philanthropic, and they're also like they know their market. Like their price point is this really right on, it's consistent. Their products are all very much simple and you really just know what you're going to get. And there's I have a bunch of shoes and from Tom's, there's one in my neighborhood, and I like when I go in, the customer experience is consistent with the brand. And so like from founder to product to pricing to customer experience, everything in that ecosystem of that brand is very clearly Tom's. And so I think they're a great brand to swipe from.
Right. Swipe right on Tom's for sure. Awesome. Erica, same question, but last thing, the way we're going to end today is Jessica, Erica, and myself. I already know my answer to this, so I'm giving you a moment to think about it. But I want you to assign all the attendees here, all 46 or so folks on the call. I want you to assign them one super specific exercise that they can do as they think about brands, super specific, and ideally something that's 10, 15 minutes max that they can leave here and then they can do by the end of the day. And folks, my homework assignment to y'all is going to be to do this thing. Believe it or not, it's going to be to do this thing. You're going to pick one, whether it's mine, whether it's Erica's, or whether it's Jessica's, minimum, pick one and just do yourself the favor, cut out those 15 minutes at some point before the end of the day. Unless you're in Europe or Asia, you should be able to have time to do this, and you're going to do that one. So Erica, I'm going to first ask you the question about what is a brand from a company or an individual that you admire. Then Jessica, Eric, and I will share one super specific time-constrained assignment, and then we'll say our goodbyes. So Erica, brand from a company or an individual who you would put in your swipe file. Who do you admire?
Yeah, the company that's in my swipe file right now, and I've been looking at their stuff a lot, is Come and Go, which if you're not familiar with it, is a gas station / convenience store. And I mean, how do you make hot dogs interesting, right? How do you make being able to pull a Pepsi out of a cooler something that's fun? But it's what they've managed to do in a really heartwarming and inclusive way that really, being a brand that orbits the oil and gas industry, those are typically a little bit more conservative or one size fits all. They're finding a way to stand out and click into people and into new generations that I think is just really smart and clever and fun. As much as I should choose a personal brand because that's what I do, I'm actually going to choose another business brand just because we've talked so much about authenticity and being able to call out those failures, those things that usually we would hide. Bumble's getting a lot of attention right now, especially I love their Bumble BFF Instagram channel. They call out the good and the bad. They're willing to say, hey, sometimes we're complete dorks. They talk about all of the experiences that usually most of us leave off the table. Is that something all of us should do on Instagram? That really depends on your brand strategy, but I'd say they're doing it in a really fun and inspiring way that everyone should check out.
Awesome. I like that a lot. Come and go and Bumble. Great answers. I was looking at Wendy's, the burger chain or whatever they do. Every year they have National Roast Day. So they make fun of other brands on Twitter. And that's just always a nice little thing to see. All right. So the final question is, what is that one homework assignment, 10 to 15 minutes long, that you assign everybody? We'll start with Jessica, then we'll go to Erica, and then I'll give mine.
I already gave it. I want people to go and to ask those 3 to 5 people, what's my unique intrinsic value? Send it out today, email your closest friends and family, get the feedback. That's the foundation to your value proposition.
All right, let me just write that down because I'll send that to everybody in an email after this. So ask 3 to 5 people what your intrinsic value is. All right, Erica.
I'm thinking a lot about those of you who are in flux and maybe you're pivoting from one thing to the other, or you're not sure what you're pivoting to. And it's like, well, how the heck do I start building my brand or getting visibility when I don't even know who I'm talking to? I'd encourage you to think about the principle that you do well by doing good. So even if you're not sure how you want to be known, all of us want to be known for doing good. So if there's someone in your network that you can even just signal boost them, share one of their posts, things of that nature. Choose one thing that you could do, even if it's once a week, twice a week, whatever you have the bandwidth for someone else in your network or someone else that's orbiting your network. That's a great way to become known as trustworthy, reliable, kind, and those things will play no matter what vertical you decide to operate in.
Awesome, perfect. I know Jessica has to go, so let me let her go. Jessica, huge thank you to you.
Thank
Really
you
appreciate it.
so much. This was so amazing. And please don't be a stranger. I think you dropped my LinkedIn in the chat, Adriel. So thank you for your time today. Come connect with me. And I'm in book launch mode, so I've got to jump to a podcast recording that starts now. So I really appreciate your time and your just asking me to be here, Adriel's beautiful group. And don't be strangers, and enjoy my book for those that you got it, and go pick it up if you didn't. And I will hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you, Jessica. For everyone else, really quickly. So I love that, Erica. I think signal boost someone you admire being the one thing, right? Throw a like, throw a comment, throw a, by the way, I love this brand, love this person deserves it, whatever. Great short task that anybody can do that really helps. Mine, you've also already heard it. Hop onto the tool, record 3 versions of your answer to what's your biggest strength. Keep it private. No one needs to see this. You don't need to make it public if you don't want to, but 3 times, do it 3 times, because if you do it just once, you're going to just do whatever comes to mind. If you do it just twice, you're just going to try again, but it's really that third one you'll find, which really brings out the value. So guys, you'll all get an email shortly after this with all those 3 recommendations. Hopefully you can test them out. And if you try Jessica's, tell her how that went. If you try Erica's, shoot her a message, tell her what you thought. And if you try mine, would love to hear what you thought as well. Guys, this was an absolutely incredible event. This is actually the first time we didn't do a networking piece because Erica and Jessica were so awesome. So let's give Erica a round of applause, and Jessica as well. Make it loud enough for Jessica to hear it, if you can. Erica, thank you very much. Now Erica and I give you guys a round of applause because showing up to these things, experimenting, trying new things is not easy. So kudos to all of you. Folks, next week we have a couple more events coming up that are going to be a lot of fun. So check out the events page. I hope everyone gets the opportunity to connect with each other. And remember, brand is about how you make other people feel. It is about emotions. So keep experimenting, keep inciting those, keep thinking about that. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very informative.